And it's Super Bowl week here on Ottawa Sports Now. This is OSN, it's Lever Sage, and my main man. It's the guy that brought me in 26 years ago. Oh, Duke Ellingson, you are old. That I am old because you are old.
Mm.
But you brought me in 26 years ago into the warm confines of the studio, and here you are being interviewed by me on Super Bowl 2026.
It's hard to believe. That must mean, if I do my math right, that we were hiring child labor back then, because what, you 8 years old or something?
pretty
26 years ago?
pretty smart mouth for an 8-year-old, I can tell you that.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's Super Bowl week. Your team is in it. The first question I'm going to ask you is this the least hyped Super Bowl that you can remember?
Least hyped?
Yeah, because it is for me. Like I literally almost have forgotten this week that the Super Bowl is on.
That's an interesting comment. I'm wondering, is it partially because you don't care about the two teams that are playing, or is it maybe that there's a lot of other stuff going on in the world of sports this week that maybe has a little bit overshadowed it? I know you follow the NBA, you got the trade deadline, you've
Mhm.
got the Olympics upon us, you've got lots of hockey stories. Maybe it's just a bit of other stuff as opposed to the Super Bowl itself, or maybe it's because it's out in the West Coast. I don't know. I hadn't really thought about it as being underhyped. I just think maybe the two teams have done a pretty good job this week of not putting up a whole lot of bulletin board material. And, really, there aren't a lot of, I'll call them superstar players in this game. I think we would both agree.
Mhm.
So, combination of things, but I would say, yeah, probably it's been a little bit lower key than others that I can remember. I mean, let's face it, how many years has it been in the NFL when either Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, or I guess any iteration of the Philadelphia Eagles have been in the Super Bowl, and now all of a sudden it's kind of lacking that, right? That one mega star, and maybe that's all part of
Yeah,
it.
it's absolutely one of those games that if you're a casual fan, you don't know a lot about the New England Patriots and the Seattle Seahawks. You don't know
Mhm.
the Patrick Mahomes and the Travis Kelce's from years gone by, and as you mentioned, Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and everybody else. And, quite frankly, these teams were a little bit I don't know if underwhelming is the word because they were good, but it wasn't like either team like, when I look to the hierarchy of what team I wanna watch on a Sunday, like,
Mhm.
that's the Dallas Cowboys for me, but it's also sometimes Patrick Mahomes and Travis
Mhm.
Kelce. Sometimes it's Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. Sometimes I like to watch the Eagles lose, but and they don't do it very often, but there's lots of teams that I want to watch during the week. The New England Patriots and the Seattle Seahawks were not like if
Mhm.
the Seahawks were on, I wasn't rushing to the TV. Like if the Patriots were playing, one of those dreadful teams and the worst schedule of all time in the history of the NFL, I didn't run to the TV.
Mhm.
So I think for me, that's probably it. A lot of casual people are only going to know Sam Darnold's a nice story. Drake May's a nice story. Mike Vrabel taking over and like they don't even know who Mike McDonald is. Like that's for me a casual NFL fan this year. And that's probably why the hype isn't there as much. Now, my question is, should there be more hype for these two teams in this game?
Well, I don't know if there should be more hype. I think there should be more appreciation, and I think it's interesting, right? In football, probably as much as any sport, when you don't have the megawatt quarterback that's putting up 35 points a game and making all these explosive plays, it's left to the rest of the team to really do the dirty work, right? And I think both of these teams just do a lot of things well. They tackle well. They don't make dumb mistakes. Their coaches don't make game management blunders, don't really turn the ball over. And in a lot of ways, that's kind of boring, right? It's hard to even quantify what that looks like when your
Right.
defensive guys are just kind of where they're supposed to be and not blowing a coverage or whatever. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think we should appreciate both these teams. And interestingly enough, read this week. This is the first Super Bowl since 1970 that both teams are top five or better in both offense and defense in terms of average yards per game and or yards given up. So we should appreciate the fact that both teams are very well balanced and have had great records this year, regardless of who
Mhm,
they've played. And obviously, both sides of the ball have been pretty successful. So we should appreciate the fact that these teams are talented, maybe not in the media way, but talented, well coached,
mhm.
conservative, and maybe boring to the outside world, but that's what gets football teams championships is playing, smart, hard-nosed, boring football.
Yeah, when you don't turn
If
the
you don't
ball
have
over.
Patrick Mahomes, if you don't have Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen.
Right. If you don't turn the ball over, you're
Yeah.
boring. Actually, that's a good team. So is a better story Sam Darnold from where he was with the New York Jets to where he is now, or Drake May with his lack of experience guiding the Patriots not only through the playoffs, but all year long has been one of, if not the best quarterback in the league? Which one's a better story?
I would lean towards the reclamation project that is Sam Darnold. I think, whenever a guy's got battle scars from 5, 6, 7, 8 years in a league and has played for a number of teams and was given up on, frankly, by most teams. And even the Minnesota Vikings last year after the playoff meltdown, they effectively made a decision that he wasn't their guy. And so for a guy like him to kind of overcome and play as well as he's played and be able to shut out the noise, kind of reinvent himself, I think that's a pretty cool story. Drake May to me is like a little bit like maybe a Dan Marino, where had success early, maybe as a result of as much as anything as the team around him. And we don't know what the next chapter of that career is going to look like. So to me, it's a nice story because he's young and it's impressive, but I don't think it's as noteworthy or even laudable as what Sam Darnold's gone through.
I guess I asked that question because when somebody has more history and it's bad history and now they're in the game, they're obviously going to be, a fantastic story to tell. I guess I just wonder how difficult it is for Drake May to do what he has done and people not giving him the credit for it. Like this guy, as a young quarterback, we've seen so many young quarterbacks come into the league and not perform very well, like Sam Darnold, and then be
Mm.
given up on and not be put in the right situation. But I mean, Drake May has gone from this quarterback that is a young quarterback that's kind of building with the rest of the team to no, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league and he's leading the team. I think that's really, to me, it's an incredible story, but he's so kind of aw shucks guy that doesn't say
Mhm.
very much that you don't talk about him as much. But maybe the question is how difficult is it for a young quarterback to be in the position that he is in?
Well, I think on one level you would say sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and that makes things a little easier because you don't have a lot of history to lean back on. I think, just as you were talking about that, I think it's interesting, and maybe we're going to see this more and more. It feels like the young quarterbacks coming into the NFL just very recently, the last 2 to 3 seasons, have had more. Not every one of them, but most of them have had some success, some pretty significant. If you think about Jaden Daniels, and you even think about C.J. Stroud, his first year when he came in and they made the playoffs, and Caleb Williams and Bo Nix, and now Drake May. There's a lot of guys that haven't had to wait to get some success. Now they haven't won Super Bowls yet, but it just feels like they're all way more pro ready.
Mm.
Not sure if it's just because of the way the offenses are taught in the NCAA, or if this is just lightning in a bottle with all these kids who just come in and been able to pick it up so quickly. Because usually most of them come into bad situations. That's why they're first round pick or first overall pick, and they got to play with a terrible team, right? But these guys have all come in and turned their teams around and their fortunes around quite quickly. So not sure exactly why, but maybe we shouldn't be all that surprised. And maybe going forward, we're going to see more of this kind of instant success with young quarterbacks.
Okay, what is your top either one or two storylines from a football perspective going into this game?
Well, I hate sometimes talking about past history because obviously the players have changed and the coaches have changed. But I do think it's quite fascinating that the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots played in a pretty remarkable Super Bowl just a few years ago, and the way it ended with the Seahawks having. And if you think back, right? I mean, the Seahawks, they would have won. I can't remember which year in order it was, right? But they completely crushed Denver. Was it the year before that Super Bowl? And this was the game in New York City when they beat Peyton Manning, like, what was it, 41-9 or whatever it
Yeah.
was. And then I think the next year was that Super Bowl, and they had a chance to win two in a row, maybe become a dynasty. And so the fact that that game ended that way against the Patriots, I think has to be a big storyline. Um, and I heard someone else talk about this, and I hadn't really considered it, but Russell Wilson was the quarterback that fateful day.
Mhm.
And when the Seahawks decided to part ways with Russell Wilson just a couple of years later, um, they got a haul of draft picks to trade him to Denver. And a lot of those draft picks now make up the core of this team. So it's almost like Russell Wilson cost the Seahawks a Super Bowl and now, in some indirect way, has been very influential, if you will,
Mm.
in building this team to get back to the Super Bowl. So I just think that Seattle New England link is fascinating to me. And then you just can't ignore the Sam Darnold story, because if we look back at how his career started, all of the quarterbacks that were in his draft class or very soon thereafter, he would have been last pick every time. If somebody said, which of these quarterbacks is going to win a Super Bowl one day,
Mhm.
Sam Darnold wouldn't be on that list, right? And so I just think that whole story is quite remarkable.
So to me, and you follow the New England Patriots a lot, one of the big questions in the game is how are the Patriots offensive line or offense going to handle the pass rush of the Seattle Seahawks? They have faced other good defenses before, and maybe you can give some insight how they've done that. This Seattle defense is tenacious.
Mm.
So how does New England deal with that? And they have dealt, right, with some very good defenses along the way.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the three playoff games New England's played, they've played top 10, I think even top 7 defenses all the way through: the Chargers, the Texans, and the Broncos, and they struggled, quite frankly, in every single game to make the kinds of big plays that they made during the regular season. Drake May completion percentage down to 50%. They didn't score very many offensive points. They didn't extend a lot of drives. The little bit of success they had, especially in the Denver game, was running the ball with Drake May. And so you're absolutely right. I mean, Seattle presents, and this is why I think New England's in really, really tough, is that this defense is that classic example of, you use the word tenacious. They're incredibly athletic. They're incredibly well coached, but they're able to bring pressure consistently without having to blitz a lot. And that's a defensive coordinator's, you know, absolute dream scenario, because you don't have, because Drake May, one thing he can do is hit big plays against the blitz, typically because of his his mobility and his arm strength.
Mhm.
But against this team, I just don't see it. I think Seattle's going to be able to pressure him without having to blitz, which also allows them, to play zone behind it, and allows their linebackers especially to kind of keep an eye in the backfield, because oftentimes when you're blitzing and you're playing man to man, quarterback can get out of the pocket and maybe run because guys have their backs turned. So Seattle, to me, presents that really unique challenge to a quarterback. Pressure's coming. I don't have big lanes to run because I got linebackers playing zone in behind, and their coverage guys are really good too. So I don't know. I don't think they're going to score much. If you're asking me how they're going to combat it,
Mhm.
I don't think very well. I think it's going to be a really tough slog for New England, short of getting some easy short fields from some turnovers or some special teams. If they
Mm.
have to go 60, 70 yards, drive after drive, I think it's going to be a really long night.
New England's been pretty good in the pass game all year long. I think from, like, all the reading and listening that I've done this week, that Seattle's gonna, you know, have a couple safeties back and they're going to make New England run the ball?
Yep.
The answer is, can New England run the ball on this team if Seattle goes back to two safeties and make sure that Drake May is going to have to earn everything down the field? I think there will be some holes. It'll
Yeah.
just be, can New England execute that? And I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. I think if they're just going to try to do it with the traditional running backs, so Ramondre Stevenson's a good between the tackles guy, usually like, he falls forward, he gets 5-6 yards, whatever. He very rarely gets caught in the backfield. Travion Henderson's more of that home run hitter, so maybe you get
Mhm.
a shot or two with him. But they've got to use Drake May, frankly. And this is the last game of the season. You got 5 or 6 months to rest, so I think you need to get Drake May involved in the running game intentionally, not just to scramble. I think you got to run some kind of bootleg naked stuff to get him outside and let him use his legs a little bit. If you can do that, that'll help. But I think you're right. I think Seattle's going to take the approach of, we're too good defensively, we're too tenacious, we're too relentless for any team to go
Mhm.
8, 10, 12, 15 plays against us. So we're going to make you do it. And we're not going to give you a deep shot. We're going to play too deep and
Yeah.
just make Drake May, again, be patient, dink and dunk. And that's, I think, where Seattle's defense is the strongest.
You hear some great stories on Super Bowl week. I listened to Tom Brady say that they had been through all 7 of their practices for the Super Bowl over 2 weeks. And then, he got together with Julian Edelman because they weren't comfortable in the red zone. And they drew up plays on Saturday morning after the 7 practices without the other teammates, installed 4 plays that they didn't practice with anybody. And 2 of them they had touchdowns on in a Super
Mm.
Bowl win. I guess the question off of that story is, how much can you over prepare when you have this long to think about the biggest game?
It's a heck of a question. I hate the fact, and I would have hated it as a player, have to have 2 weeks between a championship or a divisional final or whatever and a championship game. That's a long time to wait. That's a lot of practices. That's a lot of stopping and thinking. And I think coaches probably have been guilty of over preparing. But when you've got the likes of a Tom Brady, right, and have seen, and that's where Josh McDaniels, I think, comes into this equation, maybe because of just how much he's seen as a coordinator in this league and how much success that he's had. I think there might be some things some wrinkles, right, that they will find. But yeah, you can definitely over prepare. However, I think the most memorable story from that whole idea is the interception that Malcolm Butler had in that Super Bowl. The Patriots practiced against that particular Seattle play over and over the week of the Super Bowl, and every time the offense got a touchdown on it, Malcolm Butler was not doing what they asked him to do, and they worked on it and they worked on it, and they spent, I think, the last day of practice, they did it a number of times, and basically Malcolm Butler was told, as soon as the ball snaps, you have to just beeline, right? You can't let the guy pick the other DB. You've got to get in between and you got to just go. You just got to trust the instinct and go when you see that alignment
Mhm.
in the game. In the one moment, they ran it, he saw it, he did it, and you know the story. So sometimes that over preparation can really, really be important. And again, you can't overdo it, and you can't all of a sudden try to install 12 new plays on Saturday before the game, because when you have a young quarterback,
Yeah.
that's a recipe for disaster.
Okay, so let's get to your selections. I believe the last I had was 4.5. The Seattle Seahawks were favored by, and the over-under was 45.5. A bit of a low
Yeah.
one for a Super Bowl.
Hmm. So I know you're going to say I'm only saying this because I am a Patriots fan and I'm preparing myself for the worst. And
Mm.
if I'm wrong, I'll be happy. But if I look at it realistically, I look at I look at New England's offense against a really good Chargers defense, a really good Texan defense, and a really good Denver defense. And they didn't score. They didn't extend a lot of drives. They got help because they got a defensive touchdown against Houston. They effectively got a defensive touchdown against Denver, although they might not have scored at all.
Mhm.
When I look at that Seattle defense, they're every bit as good, maybe better than all of those teams. So why do I think all of a sudden New England's going to find a way to score 20 points or more? I just don't see it.
Mm.
I see them stuck at about 13 points. a touchdown, a couple field goals. Again, notwithstanding some turnovers or
Yeah.
special teams plays. And on the other side of the ball, New England's defense has actually looked much better, I think, than I thought they would. But they played the Chargers, who had terrible offensive line. I think they had 2 backup or third string tackles. They played Houston, where CJ Stroud continued to regress. The weather was bad, and he threw the ball to them 4 different times. And they played Jared Stidham in the snow. This isn't going to be any of those scenarios. They're playing against an offense that's firing on all cylinders, very, very well coached. Their quarterback's playing, as well as he's ever played, with lots of confidence.
Mhm.
Why do I think they're going to play as well against Seattle as they did in the other 3 games? I don't. I think they're going to struggle against Seattle's offense as well. When I put those 2 sides of the ball together, the only thing I think New England does better is coach, but I don't think that's going to be enough. So I'm saying this game is going to end up 27-13 for Seattle. It'll be under the total. I think both teams will really take the air out of the ball as best they can. Don't think there'll be any turnovers of note. And I just think New England will struggle to score, and Seattle has enough juice on offense to put up some points and eventually kind of pull away at the end.
Okay.
But I want to know your prediction.
My prediction is going to be that this is going to be a very close game. So I agree with everything you said. The only thing that I do factor in with 2 weeks of preparation is I do think New England's defense can be able to hold Sam Darnold in Seattle relatively in check. And it is going to come down to the fourth quarter. I really think that this is going to be a very low scoring kind of 17-14 game going into the fourth quarter. And then who knows? Maybe this is just the cynic in me, but everyone is just going on and on and on about the redemption story of Sam Darnold, and it's been great. But he did melt down in a big spot last year. He's played 2 games against teams this year in the playoffs, and every big game down the stretch was against teams that the Seahawks know really, really well. They had to play San Francisco in the last game of the regular season to win. They had to play San Francisco completely beat up in the playoffs, and that game wasn't close. Not because of Sam Darnold, because of the injuries of the 49ers. And then, yes, I think they played very well against the Rams, and good for him, but they also know the Rams very, very well. I don't know if they know the Patriots very well, and I don't know if Sam Darnold has got back to that, don't worry, he's going to be fine. Like he's got over all of that stuff, and he's just the best quarterback now in the NFL. I don't know if I believe it. I think the Seahawks win a very close game. I'm gonna say 2017, and I'm gonna say possibly in overtime.
Okay.
Yeah.
I should add one thing to your point. The other thing that we shouldn't forget is that Sam Darnold pulled something off this year that no one's ever done. He's the only quarterback in the history of the NFL to lead the league in turnovers and still quarterback a number 1 seeded team. He had 20 total turnovers this year, interceptions and lost fumbles. So that's odd. And maybe
It's a
the
great
Patriots
stat.
get a little bit of that. And that would be the only thing to me that would maybe change this whole game. Maybe Sam Darnold reverts back a little bit. Doesn't have to be all the way. Enough to maybe 1 turnover, maybe a fumble, maybe a little lost confidence early. Then all bets are off. But I just, big picture, I just think that's not going to happen. You can't rely on that, I guess.
That's a great stat, though. 20 turnovers from a number 1 team going into the Super Bowl. It's almost as good as the 2 quarterbacks with the initials DM that Drake May will be the 3rd quarterback, and none of the other 2 won. Hoping Drake May can turn that around. Of course, Dan Marino and Donovan McNabb.
My favorite Super Bowl trivia question of the year. That was fantastic.
I was happy when I found out it was Donovan McNabb. Uh,
There was one other DM that I don't know if he started, but he might have been on the roster from your favorite Dallas Cowboys, Don Meredith. Don't know for sure if he was on one of those Cowboy teams of the early 70s that made it to the Super Bowl. I know he didn't start, but another
mhm.
DM for you just in case you're wanting to add one to your list.
Well, with this interview, we're going to slide into everybody's DMs with the OSN Duke Ellingson.
Very nice.
Yeah,
Well done.
that's we appreciate it. Where are you? You just watching the game at home? You going to a big party? You're not a big party type of guy. So if I had to bet, you are at home in front of your TV with not a lot of people around, actually listening to the game.
I am going to be over at my daughter and son-in-law's who are big football fans, and that's it. But no, not a big party, just watching the game.
Well, enjoy yourself on Sunday for your sake. I hope the Patriots win. I
Me
don't
too.
know for anybody else's sake. I would I would hope that, but just for you, Duke.
Thank you, sir.
And look forward to talking some Red Blacks and some of the other NFL stuff that's super interesting with all the international games. The season never stops in the
Yep.
NFL, even though the Super Bowl is coming up. But enjoy the Super Bowl, and thank you very much for your time here on Ottawa Sports Now.
A pleasure as always.